I've recently become very obsessed with Kane Pixel's Backrooms. I saw the movie maybe like 2 weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it so much because it has a lot of themes of the unconscious, of trauma, of nostalgia, and how we become obsessed with mysterious things like lore and exploration of shit we don't know about. I had never seen the original series. I saw Wendigoon's video on it, and I thought that was like good enough to just get an idea of what it's about, but you really should watch the actual series. When I saw the movie, I hadn't seen the series yet, and it was totally fine. It can stand on its own, but after I saw the movie, I went back and I saw the entire series, and it adds so much context and depth to what's going on. And so for the past 2 weeks, I've just been really just watching every theory about what could possibly be going on, watching analysis about little details that turn up in the series and in the movie. And I think there's a lot. I have a lot to say about it. And I didn't expect to do a video on it, but I just keep being interested in this, and I keep thinking about it all the time. Which is weird because that's what happens to Clark in the movie. He stumbles upon this thing and it just takes over his life because he has like nothing else going for him really. So I'm not gonna go over the movie and the series. I'm not gonna give you like a summary. I'm just gonna kind of assume that you've already seen the movie, that you've watched the series, and I'm just gonna talk about it. So I think an underrated aspect of the series is how much it's tied to alchemy, like the old style of alchemy where it's like, yeah, we're gonna turn lead into gold and we're gonna use this process to do it. And that's all tied to color theory, but I'll get into that in a bit. I really just want to talk about the themes first. Some things I've noticed is that, as I just said before, when Clark finds the Backrooms, he uses it as an escape from his situation because his life is not going well. When we find Clark, he is very much in a place where he feels like he cannot get out because he's either divorced or he's separated, and he is just estranged from his wife or ex-wife, whatever she is. And he is also paying for her education and probably paying her bills. And he has a he has a furniture store that's not doing well. And so he comes across the Backrooms and it's just like, holy shit, like there's this new thing, like I've never seen anything like it. I gotta tell someone. And he kind of tells the wrong person, in my opinion, because I'm not saying you shouldn't tell your therapist like shit like this, but it's more like the therapist is a person who is gonna immediately be suspicious of you talking about crazy shit that does not make sense. But he doesn't it seems like he doesn't have any other friends, and maybe that's why he invited his employees to go with him into the Backrooms for a survey. And the Backrooms itself, to me, is very unique in the way that Kane Pixels is taking the idea, because a lot of people really want to formalize the Backrooms. I've seen some videos where it's like, this is level 1, this is level 2, this is level 3. And to me, that's just really fucking boring. That's like video game logic, and it's a little too similar to like Dante's Inferno, and Dante's Inferno has been done to death, and there's only one Dante's Inferno really. If you're gonna try to make Dante's Inferno in your own way, like you need to have your own spin on it. Like Over the Garden Wall is a good example. But the way Kane Pixels treats the Backrooms, he treats it almost spiritually. It's not scientific, even though there is an element of science in how they're analyzing the Backrooms. It's almost like they're analyzing something that cannot be analyzed, or at least it resists analysis because it's fundamentally nonsensical. It doesn't follow the rules of physics. And the Backrooms reminds me a lot of caves, because when we were early in human development as a species, we did not have our own structures really. We had to find shelter, and obviously at some point we made sharp rocks, and then we were able to cut down trees and build houses. But before then we had to use caves, and caves are a naturally forming liminal space, if you'll humor me. because a cave is weird. A cave, just the thought of it is strange, but I can see why people are drawn to them. People are always saying online, like, why would you ever go cave diving? It's insane. Why are you forcing yourself through these weird little crevices and these holes where you can't move around and you're being squished and you don't know if you're going to come out on the other side. You don't know if there's a way to crawl back up. Everyone knows about Nutty Putty Cave. That's terrifying, but we're just naturally drawn to stuff like that because it was there when we first arose from animal to human. And I'm not saying humans are above animals. If you've seen my other videos, I do place humans within like the ecosystem. We are part of the ecosystem as much as we want to convince ourselves that we're not, but we are different from your standard animal in the sense that we create things and we have ideas and we have complex relationships. But there are things that we do that are still animalistic. And one of those things is becoming obsessed with mystery, like what's in the caves. Like when you go into a cave, you don't know what's in there. You don't know if there's other animals. You don't know if there's bears. You don't know if there's bats. So you do have to explore a little bit just to make sure that the area is quote unquote clear for you to sleep there. And I'm sure at the dawn of man, you had to kind of map out a cave in your mind. I mean, they didn't literally map it, but they knew a cave so well that they felt safe calling it their home. And so it seems like that's similar to what Clark is doing. I mean, he's an architect, so naturally he's gonna feel like, I need to map this out, I need to see how it works, I need to just have like a floor plan. But the Backrooms is not a cave. It's not even reality in my opinion. It's weird. It's like the way Kane described it in an interview is it's a ghost of a building. And a lot of people, when they see the movie, they see the psychological themes and they see the things that get built out of the Backrooms and they think, well, it's a human impression. The Backrooms is taking human memories and putting it into the Backrooms and making it physical. But Kane kind of said, like, that's not exactly what's happening. It's similar to what's happening, but that's not exactly it. And I think what he means is that the Backrooms isn't just taking human memory. It's not taking human subjectivity into account. It's just kind of scanning the world. And from that scan, whatever it picks up is what it puts into the Backrooms. It's not really just, I'm gonna scan humans and all their fucked up ideas are gonna be put in the Backrooms. It's more objective in the sense that it's non-prejudice with what it's copying. It's just copying the world. It almost feels like the Backrooms wants to be the world. And that's one of the mysteries of this series. One of the big mysteries is like, what is the Backrooms doing? Why is it doing what it does? And trying to figure that out is also what Async is trying to do. Like, what they're trying to figure out, what's going on here, how does it work? And a lot of people are like, oh, Async just wants to turn this into a cash machine, you know, but that's not really their end goal. Their end goal is understanding the Backrooms. They have to do the capitalist stuff to fund their research. If they don't have money to do the research, they can't run the company. So they need to come up with a story of like how we can use the Backrooms to, you know, make money off of it. And we tell the government about it and then they fund us. That's what I think is going on. I don't think Async really is like trying to be the next $1 trillion company. And so there are a lot of elements inside the Backrooms themselves that to me are very captivating. For instance, we can talk about one of the first things that shows up in the entire series, the life forms. The life forms, if I were to say anything about it, I would say that when Kane first made the series, I don't think he was obligated to create a monster. It just felt like for the time it came out, which was
2022,
everything had to have a monster in it. Nothing could just exist as it is. There had to be some sort of hook to it. And so Kane was like, why don't I just put this weird freaky monster in it? And now he's just, I'm not gonna say he wrote himself into a corner, because I think he's done something very interesting with it, but he has said himself that if he could go back and redo it, he would not include the life forms. But at the same time, he does not believe in retconning any ideas in a world, and I totally agree with him. I hate when I see a extended series of something and there's a retcon and the retcon doesn't make any sense. Like, you can retcon. I don't know if you guys seen Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, but in Breaking Bad, Saul Goodman, he calls the DMV, but it's not called the DMV in New Mexico. So that was kind of like a little bit of a plot hole, like, oh, those writers, someone better have been fired for that blunder. But in Better Call Saul Goodman basically says, oh yeah, I know it's not called the DMV, but I'm from this place where we actually have a DMV, and I'm just gonna keep calling it the DMV. And to me, that's like an elegant way of retconning something. And Better Call Saul has tons of these little breadcrumbs of, we're gonna retcon something, but we're gonna make it make perfect sense. And so I think I don't think you can really do that with the life forms. I think at most, Kane could probably just say they're not very common, because what they are, or what they seem to be, I should say, is that we notice that every time a life form appears, aside from the first episode, there's a dead body around. And they have also, early on in the series, they recovered a dead body from the Backrooms, and there was bacteria in it, and the bacteria is Hey Bacillus. So a lot of people assume that the life forms are Hey Bacillus because they also have another name. They're called the bacteria. And so what a lot of people theorize is that it's either bacteria that made its way into the Backrooms somehow through people bringing it in and then dying, and then through the process of how a body decomposes, this bacteria gets exposed to whatever force is responsible for the Backrooms, and it becomes transformed into the life form. And I think I just really want to see one up close. I want to see Async like capture one and dissect it, or whatever they do to it to study it. But at the same time, it's like, what would that be too much? Would that be too much to reveal? Is it better to leave them a mystery? I'm not sure. And this is one of the bigger mysteries of the Backrooms, because the life forms are so cool, they're so interesting, and it seems like what they do is they're bacteria that takes dead human body parts and puppets them around like a fucked up like marionette, and they can almost read a person's memories and they can vocalize as them, but it comes out all fucked up. Like they're mimicking human speech, but it's almost like they don't know what they're saying. They're just kind of repeating what plausibly could have been the person's last words. So the life forms are so fucking creepy, and I would say they're pretty unique as a concept. I have not seen anything quite like it. It's almost like a zombie. It's a little bit like Jeepers Creepers, but it's very much its own thing. Another thing that I really liked is how much Clark's mural is my favorite thing in the entire movie, because it's just it's another big mystery. It's like, what the fuck do these things mean? Because it seems like when you first look at it, it looks like a lot of gibberish and stuff, but he has things on there that say like, tables don't bleed. Like, what does that mean? And he has drawings of like other inhabitants of the Backrooms. One of them almost looks a little bit like a life form. Like, did he see one? He drew async researchers, so he saw those. And it's just a big mystery of like what Clark saw in his time in the Backrooms, because he was in there, I don't know, anywhere from like 2 weeks to a month, because I'm not too sure how long the time had passed from when he decided like, I'm gonna have an extended stay in the Backrooms and not talk to my therapist anymore, and then to the time where he actually like reached out to her and told her, I found this crazy shit. Because it wasn't so long that his clothes were all tattered, but it was a while, I know that. Anyway, there are different murals in the Backrooms. There's the first one that may or may not still be canon. It has like a face with its eyes closed, or alternatively, the eyes could be black. And it also has a window at the top, and it has things that say, close your eyes. It says, don't move, because apparently the life forms are drawn to movement and maybe to vision. Who knows? Maybe it's drawn to eye contact. But we've never seen someone just stand still around a life form, obviously, because the life forms are terrifying, and it's something that you instinctually want to run away from. There's also a weird moon phase thing that appears in Clark's mural that also appears in Peter Tench's drawings. Peter Tench is a central character to the Backrooms online series, or YouTube series, I should say. The Backrooms kind of affected him the same as it affected Clark. It totally consumed him. He got lost in there. And then Async framed his death as a, quote, fiery wreck outside of a vineyard. So when he turns up again, it's very inconvenient for them. And they have him like in some kind of room doing nothing. And they're trying to figure out like, what can we do with this guy? Like, we can't just keep him. And Peter is expecting to be able to see his family again, but he just goes crazy because he has lost touch with reality. He can't tell the difference between the Backrooms and the real world anymore. So he escapes Async confinement and he escapes into the Backrooms again for quite some time until they find him again, and he shoots one of the Async researchers, and then he's running rampant around the Async facility and he runs away, and they either actually kill him or he escapes. But I think they do kill him. I think there was some extra recording of him that had shown, because Async had told the other employees, oh, when he escaped, he fell down a hill and he hit his head on a rock and he died. But then there's like footage of him where that's like not happening. So it's very plausible that he either actually got away or he was killed. I think that's what the story is actually saying, that he actually was done away with. So now we can talk about the alchemy stuff. There is an episode called home_27647.mov, and in that particular video, I think Kane gave a little too much away, because for a brief moment he showed a image of what is called the Potomac astronomical model, that this is where the Earth is at the center of the universe, and the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars they're revolving around the Earth, and it's basically a map of
geocentrism.
And this is very indicative of an alchemist way of thinking, because they existed around the same time. And it's also telling you that in this particular universe, the Kane Pixels Backrooms universe, this is how the world works. Not literally, but in a way metaphorically. Because yes, the Earth still works the same way, where it's like revolving around the sun, and the universe works completely normally. But this is all within one dimension. It's like, think of the entire universe as one sphere. Okay, but everything outside of that is something else. Everything outside of quote unquote the earthly realm is this weird Backrooms shit. And I'm not saying that it's all like rooms and rooms and rooms, but it's like when the Backrooms first made contact with physical reality, which in the series is called Standard, it got an impression of Standard, and through that impression it started building buildings, it started building hallways, it started building still lives. I'm assuming still lives are not new. That's another thing I want to talk about, because still lives are fucking weird. But the Backrooms is almost like the collective unconscious, but it's not the collective unconscious of people, it's just reality's collective unconscious. That's what I'm reading it as, because it is memorizing moments in time in a way and trying to preserve that, but it's not doing a very good job, because as Kane has said, the more it remembers, the more it doesn't remember. Which is to say, when you copy something and it has an imperfection, when you copy it again, that imperfection gets bigger, and then there are other imperfections onto the third rate copy, that if you keep copying over and over, the original thing just loses its form and it becomes something totally new, and it's unrecognizable. And that's basically what the Backrooms is doing. It's copying things and copying them, and it's getting them more fucked up. It's almost like, have you seen that AI video where they tell an AI to just make the same image over and over, and it just gets really weird looking? By the end of it, it looks nothing like how it was at the beginning, that's basically what the Backrooms is doing. And I'm not trying to say that the whole thing is a allegory for AI or like a metaphor for AI, because it was made before AI came out. It was made in 2021, so it was kind of right before AI became a thing. But going back to Alchemy, the reason I think it's tied to Alchemy is because, and I'm not sure how intentional this is. I'm not saying it's unintentional. I'm not saying it's totally intentional. I'm not even saying that this is like the main theme of the series. I don't think this is the main theme of the series. This is just a parallel that I have found. I don't know if this is Kane Pixel's intention, so please do not like quote me on this. This is just something I've put on top of it. So in Alchemy, there's a process of purification needed to achieve the magnum opus, which is the Philosopher's Stone. It's the greatest creation because it can transmute any form of matter into another form. So the way that goes is that there are 4 steps. It starts with Nigredo, then it goes into Albedo, then Sinitrus, then Rubedo. And so basically what that means is that the first step, Nigredo, is a breaking down. It's a decomposition. It's just breaking down something to its base materials, and that means impurities and base materials put together. It's all just broken down. Then there's Albedo, which is Nigredo is symbolized by the color black. The second step, Albedo, is symbolized by the color white. And the reason for that is the second step is purification, Albedo. It's turning the black into the white. It's removing the impurities from what was broken down. And so you keep removing the impurities, and eventually you enter Sinitrus. And Sinitrus is symbolized by the color yellow. And yellow is liminal, weirdly, in Alchemy, because yellow is not quite completed, but it's on its way to being completed. And so when the material reaches Sinitrus, it gains a little bit of a tinge of yellow. And the fourth and final step is red. It's Rubedo. And this should get you your Philosopher's Stone. You've purified something so deeply and intensely, and then you've reconstituted it, and you've done that over and over until finally you've gotten this mass of just pure creation, and it's the Philosopher's Stone. And with the Philosopher's Stone, you can use that to transform lead into gold, which was the final goal of the alchemists. They were like, we're gonna make a material that can turn anything into gold. And so there is a lot of this color theory going on throughout the series. Nigredo, there's one thing that's black in the series, and that is the life forms. And it's interesting because Nigredo is decomposition. It's breaking things down. And who is that tied to? Who is that color tied to? The life forms, the bacteria. They break down the dead bodies that people, they fall into the Backrooms, and then they can't find food, and then they die. And then they get turned into this life form. Albedo's interesting to me too, because the closest thing I can think of to represent that would be the Async company, because Albedo has to do with separating impurities from what's essential. And that's kind of what Async does. They're taking everything in the Backrooms and they're sorting through it, and they are categorizing it, and they're trying to make sense of it. They're trying to organize the information found within the Backrooms. I don't know if it's working. I don't know if that can be done, but like that's their goal. They're like, we're taking all this material and we're fucking organizing it, and we're trying to make sense. That's the organization. They're trying to make sense of the Backrooms, and that's why I associate them with the color white. And obviously the white lab coats, the white walls within the facility, it's all white. It might be a stretch, admittedly, but I think it does make sense. Yellow is obvious. The Sinitrus symbolism is obvious. It's the Backrooms itself. Sinitrus is liminal. It's a process, which is what the Backrooms is. It's almost like the Backrooms is trying to work towards something. And what that thing is, I will talk to when we get to like the final stage. But the yellowness of the Backrooms represents liminality. It's like, I'm not at the beginning, I'm not at the end, I'm in the middle somewhere. And that's the whole idea behind liminal spaces as well. Liminal spaces in their original definition were kind of like hallways. They're big walkways it's not necessarily a room, even though there are rooms in the back rooms. It's in between spaces that you don't really think about. Because when you're going from point A to point B, you're not thinking of the line between them. You're just absentmindedly going from one point to another. And that's kind of how the hallways of the back rooms is. It's endless hallways, endless liminality. And Kane also had said, I'm not too sure he said this, but a lot of people have quoted him to say that every room in the back rooms is connected to another. You can't get a room that does not have a way out, which is comforting but also terrifying, because that means like you're in a maze with no dead ends. It's just an endless maze. And so now we have to move on to the final stage in the alchemical process, which is rubedo. It's red, and that is the permanent state. Okay, so it's not liminal anymore. It's like the final creation. So what is red in the series? In the series, there is a red city. And to me, the red city is this like final achievement of the backrooms, because all of the backrooms, from what we saw up to the point of found footage 3, where there's the red city, we've only seen hallways. We've only seen endless yellow hallways. But then when found footage 3 comes around, it takes place more into the future. It's the furthest thing that takes place into the future in the series so far. Most of the series takes place around 1990, but found footage 3 takes place in like 1995 or something like that, or 97. I'm not sure. And so around this time, the backrooms looks a little different. I'm not sure if the backrooms has changed, but it does look different. It has more of like an office space type thing. And in found footage 3, it starts off in an office area, then it moves on to more of like a residential area, and finally it goes into a commercial area. So when Ravi, the main character of found footage 3, goes into this executive office space, kind of like a conference room, there's a big window, and he walks up to the window and he's looking around and he sees like a giant city. It's just bathed in this red light, and he looks down and there's like an oversized like street sign that's the size of a house, and there's trees down there too. And so I think this is kind of what the backrooms, the end point that it wants to create in a way, metaphorically, symbolically, because this is the rubedo stage. They're no longer hallways. They're actual like fully formed office buildings with open air, with what seem like trees. There's streets, there's sidewalks. And it's, like I said earlier, it's almost like the backrooms wants to become standard. It wants to become the world, but it can't, because it's only able to copy. It's not able to make life from within itself. But if this is its rubedo stage, and there are trees growing, it might actually, and might I also say that in found footage 3, that is the first time we see a still life. So that means that life is emerging from the backrooms independent of any outside contamination. So the still lives are, in a way, the most perfect creation of the backrooms, because it's proof that the backrooms can create life from within itself. But that's also it's all just a theory. It's a fucking game theory, okay? It's like, this is just me putting alchemy stuff on top of the backrooms. And there is one more thing I should add having to do with alchemy, and that is the green dragon. What the green dragon represents is vital energy. It represents vitality, but not just growth, not just like, oh, things are flourishing. It's almost violent in its consumption. So this is probably the hardest thing to explain, because when people think of life and they think of green energy, they just think of like, oh, it's a greenhouse. Like, there's things growing here. Like, it's a forest. Oh, it's growing really well. It's growing wildly, you know. And yeah, there is an element to that, but it's specifically in its character, it is aggressive, because the green dragon eats the sun, and through eating the sun it grows. And so it's violent growth, but not on purpose. It's just things grow and it grows violently, and if you're in the way, you get fucked up. And that's not on purpose. I'll just say that it's not purposefully trying to harm. It's just more like, I'm growing and like, get out of the way, or you're gonna get hurt. And so we see that in the Backrooms as well. There's a phenomenon called the green light. And the green light is something that appears maybe like once or twice in the movie at the beginning, but in the series it appears a lot. Specifically in Found Footage 2. Because in Found Footage 2, there is a little girl running around in the Backrooms and she is running away from the life forms. But she also is in an area of the Backrooms that does not look very much like what we're used to. She starts out in an area that has cream colored walls and it has circular lighting fixtures in the ceiling, which is obviously they're not the yellow walls with like the office lights. But as she explores the Backrooms more, we find her more in like a familiar setting. But this part of the Backroom seems in a way unstable, and it's not sure why, but there's a lot of green light flashing around in rooms. We're not in one of the rooms when that happens until the very end, because she's running away from a life form at the end, and there's like green lights flashing a lot in rooms, and she's avoiding them for the most part until she gets to a dead end, and she's like, fuck, this life form is like right behind me and I'm in a dead end room. Like, she starts praying to God, like, please don't let it find me. And when she does that, and I'm not saying the two are connected, so don't interpret it that way, but as she is hiding in this dead end room, there's a green cracking that happens all over the walls. It looks like an egg shattering. There's green light coming through the cracks, and the footage ends, but a lot of people take this to mean that this is how the Backrooms expands. It emits a green light, almost like a chemical reaction. And after it's done emitting that light, there is suddenly a new area of the Backrooms. And this girl in Found Footage 2 just happened to be in an area where the Backrooms itself was actively expanding. So that's the green dragon symbolism. Thank you for bearing with me through this schizophrenic episode during this entire video. I will also say that the movie has a lot of interesting ideas about childhood, because I feel like Mary, in a way, she represents childhood and kind of having to become an adult, because she carries that like little piece of concrete around with her that she had since childhood, where her home got destroyed. And when she's running away from Pirate Clark, I think these childhood parallels are the most obvious, because Pirate Clark is the size of an adult and Mary is the size of a child. In relative terms, Pirate Clark in a way is kind of a personification of her fears when she was a kid. Not necessarily that like that's what it is, it's just a parallel. Okay, so Pirate Clark, an adult, Mary, a child. She is running away from the pirate, but not just that. Like, if it was just that, that wouldn't be enough. She does certain things that little kids do when she's running away from the pirate. For example, when she's running up the stairs away from Pirate Clark, she kind of climbs the stairs on all four legs, and I think that was done like not four legs, on all four limbs. Like, she uses her hands and she uses her legs to climb, to run up the stairs. And I don't think that was done like accidentally, you know, like, yeah, she did stumble, but I think Kane directed it that way on purpose. It's supposed to mirror in your mind, like, that's how a child runs up the stairs. And also when she's running across the couches, like, when you're a kid, like, who doesn't run across couches, you know? Like, you're small and couches are bouncy. Like, it's just natural to like run on couches, you know? And I just think that at the very end of their encounter, you know, Clark kind of has her pinned to the ground, and she takes that piece of concrete with her childhood handprint on it and she like smashes it into the side of his face. And I think that's just a way of her like finally overcoming her childhood trauma in a way, because when she was younger, she couldn't fight back against her mom, because obviously she's a child and this is her caregiver, and not just that, like, she's her actual mom. And, you know, by the time she could actually talk to her mom and have a conversation about what happened, her mom is institutionalized and talking to her would do nothing, essentially. But I think I just wanted to point that out because no one else had been talking about that. As for Async in the series, I think they are way over their heads as a company. It seems like they're not evil, and I think a lot of people agree on this from the discussions I've seen online. They're not trying to be evil. They're not trying to be an evil capitalist company who's only interested in their bottom line. It's really not that. I think it's more like they're a research company that has found the discovery of not just a century, but the discovery of like the human race, basically. It's as impactful as going to the moon. It might be even more, because it's not just going to space and having an idea of how like space is. It's a new dimension. It's not even within our universe. And so any company, any scientist, any researcher would would kill to be part of this. And yeah, I guess we can talk about Ivan Beck now, because Ivan Beck is this very mysterious figure in the series, and he looms over the series. His fingerprints are all over everything. Even in the movie, there is a mention of him. And who Ivan Beck is that he's technically vice president of the company, but the way he acts and the way he moves and everything comes down to his decisions, it's more like he is actually the prime mover of the plot's momentum, because he is the one who, it seems at least, first made contact with the Backrooms. He is the one who is most invested in finding how the Backrooms works, what is going on. He's super invested in this. And this first happened in the 70s. A solar flare struck the Earth, and I don't know what he was doing with magnets or something like that. He was running some kind of experiment. Honestly, I need to rewatch the series to know exactly what he was doing, but it supercharged whatever machine he was playing with, and it created the portal into the Backrooms. But as it was doing this, electricity shot out, and it shot straight into his eye. So he is like either missing an eye, or one of his eye is like very deformed from his accident. So he is very similar to Captain Ahab, and the Backrooms is his white whale. He is a wounded person chasing a goal that cannot be claimed. And Kane has said that he is the protagonist and antagonist of the story. I would love to see more of him in the story. I think we're gonna get that. I don't know how far along we are in the story. It's been going on for a while, and it could plausibly keep going. I mean, there have been talks about sequels to the movie. There have been talks about series on streaming, which would be really awesome. I would love to see what Kane Pixel does with making a series, like the YouTube series, but with a budget. And yeah, I think there's a lot there. I'm kind of losing like organization with this video, because it's just a bunch of notes I took frantically, and they're not in any kind of order at all. I didn't even get to talk about still life, really, because still lives are like a big part of this series now, even though they kind of entered late into the thing. Still lives are so cool because they're not zombies, they're just copies of people, but they're not just any kind of copy. They're not like this, like, oh, it's a copy, but it's like something is off with them. It's like, no, they're from the first time you see it, something is fucked up about this thing. And like, still lives are just, they're perfect for the Backrooms. I think they're so perfect, because what would the Backrooms need to complete itself? It's full of fucked up furniture, is full of fucked up architecture. The last thing it needs, to complete itself is fucked up people living in there. And I think it would be really awesome to just see how far they can take this concept. Because what would be really, I don't know if this is like, I shouldn't say appropriate or inappropriate. It's just more like, is this right for the series? But I would love to see Async like maybe get like 2 more advanced still lives, because if you've seen the movie, you know that some still lives are filled with like marshmallow fluff or whatever the fuck he pulled out of that bearded still life. Clark unbuttoned his shirt, and then he like reached into his chest, or he cut out like a square, and he yanked out, like, to me when I first saw it, I thought it looked like fat, like from meat, like if you've ever had a steak and there's like chunks of fat, it looked like that to me, but I don't think it's exactly that. I think it's just like anomalous nutritious material. I have no idea how it would taste. It could be bland, it could be sweet, it could be like umami, like who knows. Can you cook it? So some still lives are made of the weird globular stuff, but Pirate Clark he has a full anatomy. And Pirate Clark is probably the most interesting still life that we've seen in the series so far, obviously, because he is the main movie monster of the Backrooms, and also what he represents. He represents Clark's overinflated ego of himself. He represents Clark's animosity towards his ex-wife, and also how Clark sees himself as so grand. And a lot of people theorize that he is actually the reason Clark, or I should say the reason Pirate Clark has more of like a fully formed anatomy is because Clark spent so much time near a null zone, which is what the portals are called in the series. He lived inside of the furniture store because he was estranged from his wife, and so he lived on his furniture, and when the Backrooms was copying him, it could keep building upon his still life. But even then, like, the still life is also of Clark is very strange in the sense that it seems to have a will. It seems to recognize Clark as itself until, you know, the very end, where Clark makes a decision. He's no longer in between two minds about who he is as a person. Clark finally says he closes the decision gap. He is no longer liminal. He says, I'm gonna stay here. I have made a decision. I no longer have any illusion about where my life is going. I'm gonna stay in the Backrooms. And at that moment, the Pirate Clark is like, you're no longer liminal in your being. You're no longer spiritually like liminal, so I don't recognize you anymore. You're not me. I'm gonna eat you. So Saturn eats his son, and Mary runs away. And when Mary finds Async researchers and they like spray her down, whatever, and she wakes up, she can see that they're analyzing the carcass of Pirate Clark. And they a gruesome detail is that his hat was part of his body. So they remove the hat, and you can just see his like skinned like scalp. And there are X-rays on the walls, and he has a fully formed anatomy, complete with organs and a skeleton and like a muscular structure, which is extremely fucked up. It must be very painful to live as him. And yeah, like my idea is like, how far can these still lives be human, you know? Because I don't know if this is appropriate for the series, but I think it would be cool if Async, you know, caught two reasonably developed still lives and, you know, put them like one male still life and one female still life, you know, put them in like an enclosure, I guess, and see if they can make a baby still life. Like, I think that would be interesting. Like, would that happen, you know? And if that could happen, then that just means the Backrooms has achieved its goal of being a world unto itself, being a second Earth. But yeah, that's like pretty much everything I've been wanting to say. I think, you know, it's no wonder that people get attacked when they go into the Backrooms. They don't belong there. It's its own world, even though it's a copy of the world. I think if there's any other alchemy symbolism, it would probably be that Earth is the prima materia, which means it's the unstable, corruptible base of something that you transform through the alchemical process. And I think that's what the Backrooms is. It's, to me, so far from what we've seen in the series, that is what the Backrooms is. It's kind of taking the prima materia of Earth and transforming it and trying to make something perfect out of it, but it's not going well. It's getting more fucked up, if anything. I think the Red City is, in a way, it can't be the only Red City. I mean, like, if the Backrooms is endless, there's probably tons of Red Cities. There's like probably even grander open areas, we can only ever see just a small sliver of what the Backrooms could possibly be holding. But I guess for the final section, I'll just say that I think the Backrooms, it represents not just alchemy, as I've pushed really hard in this video. I think it also represents how people get lost on the internet. Because if you remember the whole liminal thing, not just the Backrooms image, the 4chan image, just the idea of liminal spaces in general, that's an internet phenomenon. And, you know, people have recognized it subconsciously. If you've ever seen any of David Lynch's movies, he always includes like liminal spaces. He just doesn't name them as such. He kind of makes them to be spiritual areas. He makes them areas where the veil is thin. And that's kind of like what caves were too, you know. They were between the underworld and the living world. The path to the underworld is almost always through a cave. It's never, you never go straight there. You have to go through this like in between space. And so yeah, like that's how I see it. I think people get lost in the Backrooms, not just literally, but also metaphorically, as we've seen with Clark and Ivan Beck. But they are reflections of us, because we are always using the internet to escape. We are using liminal pictures and stuff like that to engage in nostalgia. There's an endless supply of grainy pictures from the past, from your childhood era, that you can look at online. You can get totally lost in there, and you know, for a time that was interesting to me, and I would spend hours and hours just going across the internet looking at pictures from like the 90s and the 2000s and just be like, why did we let this go? Why can't things be like this again? Things were better. But you know, you spend enough time there and you realize things weren't really all that different, because everyone still had to pay bills, everyone still had personal problems, people still hated their boss, people still had things they wanted to say that they couldn't say. They couldn't find their voice. People wanted to be writers, but they were too unsure of themselves to write. They wanted to follow their dreams, they couldn't. And so I think every generation kind of looks back and says, the previous generation, they had it good, they had everything, and now we have nothing. But that couldn't be further from the case. And I think there have been things that have been lost, but I think there's things that we've gained. It's funny because I was reading this book called On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and there is a sentence where this guy, he's a character, his name is Old Bull Lee, and he is based on William S. Burroughs, who was another Beat Generation writer. But he basically says to the main character, and this book takes place in the 40s, by the way. He says, things were better in the 1910s. You could go and get any drug you wanted and no one cared. And society was just so much better. There was hardly any crime. And it's just like, the fuck? You know, like this is in the 40s. This is not even in the 50s, where all the boomers point back to the 50s and they're like, that was the best it ever got. America, ever since then, has never been the same. Even back then, even before that time, people were looking back and saying, like, why can't we have that time back? And then you get to the 50s, there's Singing in the Rain. I think that either came out in the 50s or 60s, but then that whole movie is just looking back at the golden age of cinema, and they're like, things suck now, things fucking suck, let's go back to the golden age of Hollywood where things were better and everyone was happy. And it's just, dude, you're in the middle of like what everyone points to as the best time that America ever had. What are you saying? And you see this pattern occurring all over the time, and you get to the 80s and people are looking back at the 50s and like they're trying to recreate the 50s with like fucking Happy Days and shit like that, and maybe that was like the late 70s, but it's the same shit. Get what I'm saying? There was a lot of 50s nostalgia in the 80s, and then you get further out, and now everyone nostalgias the 80s, and like we're moving on to a point where people are like Y2K was the thing, but all of that shit is not true, you know. Like it's just you escaping from your problems. It's not, you can't go back because like why would you want to? Like there's nothing there. Everything's here, everything's growing here. All the changes being made are happening now. You can go back and visit. You can read a book that took place in the time that you're missing, but you don't need to get lost in it. And I got lost in it for a bit, but then it just lost its charm to me. I just started seeing what it really was. I saw it for what it was. But anyway, yeah, I'm just gonna before I go off into like multiple tangents that have nothing to do with the Backrooms, I think, yeah, we're all kind of Ivan Beck, okay? We're all the protagonists and antagonists of our own story. We all get in our own way. I don't think anyone's ever been more of an antagonist to me in my story than myself, because the only person who's ever held me back was me. And you are the protagonist of your own story, and you are the antagonist of your own story. No one gets in your way more than you. We're all wounded. We're all chasing something that we may or may not ever get. But that's what being a human is. And Clark is the same way too, you know, like we can choose to revel in misery, or we can choose to move on. You can be Clark or you can be Mary. But yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say. I think the Backrooms is about the human condition. It's the unconscious of the world made manifest, not on purpose, but through contact. We'll see if my theory is correct as the series goes on. I really hope that Kane, I hope that he answers some questions, but I also hope that some of them stay open-ended, because if you look back at the Elden Ring and the FromSoft games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, what makes those games good is all the mysteries in those games were not answered. So what that gives you is, if you have unanswered questions that, I mean, obviously you should answer the big ones that everyone wants to know, but there should be like little unanswered questions, because that's what makes a work live forever, because people will endlessly theorize. They'll endlessly wonder about this world that is no longer being created, I guess I could say. But yeah, that's all my thoughts on the Backrooms. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your ideas are. Tell me if you even like the movie. Just, I want to talk more about this. It's just more, I go on the subreddit and it seems like people are just too interested in the movie itself. They don't really talk too much about the series, or maybe they were before the movie came out, and then the movie just, you know, captured everyone's attention. But it seems like not a lot of theorizing is going on, in the sense on like the Elden Ring subreddit or the Bloodborne subreddit. It's not to that level, and to me it should be, because there's so much to talk about with this fucking series, and it was made by a 2-year-old. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video. I just needed to get all of this off my chest. I feel like I did. Have a good day. Have a good day.